Welcome to the Carousel of Happiness Podcast. I'm your host, Allie Wagner. It is election season at the Carousel and things are starting to heat up. For those of you just joining us, Mayor Giraffe's term is ending in May and we are looking for a replacement mayor. 3 of the most beloved carousel animals, lion, dragon, and pig, each have announced their candidacy in a flurry of puns and silly quips. This is not Washington politics as usual. This is Nederland politics. Quirky, offbeat, and a little tongue-in-cheek. As the primary carousel news outlet, we've got your election coverage here on the podcast. Each vote for mayor is $1, and all of the money we raise between now and May 26th is 100% tax deductible and goes directly back into the carousel to keep us spinning. There are so many ways to participate. You can vote either online or in person. You can become a Wonder Scout and rally others to vote. If you get 10 people to vote for the candidate of your choice, you get a free ride on the carousel. If you get 20 people to vote, you get a free t-shirt. Perhaps you'd like to become a campaign partner. If you donate $100 or more to the candidate of your choice, you get a free 15th anniversary t-shirt and a mention on our website and this podcast. If you donate $250 or more, you get all of that stuff plus a free copy of Scott Harrison's new coffee table book, Carousel Soul. In it, he explains the story behind each and every carving in the carousel. The riding animals, the hitchhikers, the somewhere else wall, all of it. If you've ever wondered why the rooster has a pearl necklace or why the cow has horns, you can find all of those answers and more inside that book. Plus, Scott reveals some of his secrets for how he carved each and every animal and why. Big shout out to Larry and Jane McGrath, longtime donors and volunteers who engaged in a little pork barrel spending and became campaign partners for Miss Piggy Stardust. Thank you so much. Oink oink to you both. And it is not just Pig who's receiving some electoral love this week. We've had votes come in for both Lion and Dragon as well, which brings us to today's episode. Last week, the Porcine Party to elect Pig for mayor sponsored a story about a local animal sanctuary just outside Nederland. You heard stories about their 2 sassy pigs, a baby yak, and a super sneaky dog. Plus, we had a lovely conversation about the power of radical love and acceptance for all. And because an election would not be an election without a conversation about our troops, today's episode is sponsored by the magical fire-breathing folks over in the Dragon's Lair. They've taken their talons and their talents to this episode, bringing you a story about how a local dragon has helped veterans return home to themselves and heal from war. Today, you'll hear a story about the Warrior Storyfield project down in Longmont, and we've got a great episode for you about the healing power of art. Let us begin with today's story. When you enter the Carousel of Happiness and approach the front desk, on the right side of the counter, you'll see a metal stand with some butterflies on it. And if you look closely, you'll notice these aren't just any butterflies. They are forged from metal and absolutely spectacular looking. With beautiful gold coloring, rich in texture, and formed as if they could fly away on their own. For most folks, that's all they see. They see a beautiful piece of art in a gift shop to be admired. But if you look closely, you'll notice a flyer nearby with more information about the butterflies and the people who made them. They are a product of the Warrior Storyfield in Longmont and part of a larger project that will absolutely take your breath away. In 2013, artist Robert Bellows was a civilian artist working in metal sculpture. He was working on a private commission to build a metal rooster when two Iraq War veterans, Brad Gallup and Danny Moore, showed up in his shop. "Can we help?" they wanted to know. Robert said sure, thinking they'd be here for a day or two. And 9 months later, they were still there. They had shown up nearly every day to work on the project with Robert, learning how to forge and shape metal feathers, how to weld, and how to bring a piece of art to life. And in between cuts and beads, the men talked about ghosts, about demons, about what it was like to come home from war. And it was through these conversations that these men, Robert included, found themselves changed. Robert noticed that the vets became softer, more embodied, more relaxed as a result of working on the project. And he himself found a new artistic challenge. Slowly and gradually over time, Robert gave the veterans more and more artistic agency and responsibility. He challenged them to make decisions about the work. He encouraged them to use their bodies to express the work. He invited them to listen to the work itself. How did it want to be expressed? How did it want to be shaped? And in doing so, Robert learned how to collaborate. He learned how to delegate. He learned how to articulate his own unique way of making art to others. And after 9 months, the private commission completed, the three men looked at each other and asked, "What's next?" For the next 12 years, they began asking some unanswerable questions, like, what does it take for a veteran to come home from war? What does it feel like to fight for your country? How does one carry the lessons of war back into civilian life? How do you protect and nurture a human heart? For the next 12 years, upwards of 100 veterans, civilians, and their families have contributed their own answers to these questions in the form of two massive metal sculptures, a 16-foot dragon and an 18-foot phoenix, locked in a permanent stare-down, eye to eye, with space in between. In today's society, there is so much pressure on all of us to know all of the answers all of the time, and the story field is different. The intention of this work explicitly is to ask unanswerable questions and speak the unspeakable. Through these sculptures, participants are encouraged to reach into the depths of their guts and the depths of their hearts to express the emotions within. Robert knows the power of expressing what is within. While not a veteran himself, he struggled with depression as a young man and tried everything to quote-unquote fix it. Therapy, drugs, even the woo-woo stuff, he said. But the only time he felt genuine relief from his symptoms was when he was polishing a pair of pliers. There was something about the simplicity of it, the utilitarian nature of it, that gave him comfort. And when, as a teenager, he was given access to and free reign over a metal shop, he began making metal sculptures. Little junk sculptures, as he called them, out of whatever metal he could find. And in doing so, he discovered that the other side of his depression was not happiness or joy, it was expression. Through his own personal expression, he was able to lift himself out of the depths. And he knew all of this when Brad and Danny arrived in his shop in 2013. After the private commission was completed, the men wanted to work on a piece that reflected themselves, the experience of veterans. And they told Robert they wanted to make a ghost or a demon. Robert refused because, according to him, it wasn't reflective of the men standing before him. They were neither ghosts nor demons. He saw in them something they yet could not see. They were complex human beings with depth and richness within, and if the sculptures were to be about them, they needed to reflect that. According to Robert, the beauty of art is its ability to dismiss filters, to ignore rank, to force its participants to feel what they don't want to feel, to drop a deep line within themselves and fish out what is festering inside. In the end, they decided on a dragon and a phoenix, locked eye to eye with space in between. The dragon represented the warrior's experience in training, in service, and at war. It is ferocious and focused, intense and confident. But it is also fearful and angry, isolated and betrayed. The phoenix, on the other hand, represented the many transformations every warrior must face when they return to civilian life. The phoenix is vigilant, still scanning for potential threats. It is fierce, having come back from the depths of a crucible only a handful truly can comprehend. But there's also a softness to the phoenix, a tenderness, and a slight clumsiness of a newly born being in the process of dusting off a throbbing, wounded heart to share with others. How does a veteran learn to trust again? How does a veteran learn to love again? Only the phoenix knows the answers to these questions. And then there's the space between. A third sculpture, seemingly without form. The space between the dragon and the phoenix was intentional. When complete, the dragon and the phoenix will be placed in a large park, facing each other in an eternal stare. The space between these symbols will become a community gathering place, a sacred field of expression where art and healing can take place, where veterans and civilians alike can listen to and share their stories of what it means to come home from war, what it means to come home to themselves. Last Friday, a group of Carousel employees, board members, and volunteers visited the Warrior Storyfield for the first time. We had the opportunity to sit in conversation with Robert, as well as a handful of veterans and civilians who've worked on the project. Some of them have been working on the piece since its inception. Others have popped in and out. Each of them had their version of the Storyfield story, the meandering list of synchronicities and coincidences that led them to the Storyfield, the moment that they were called to it. We learned what it was like for them to participate, what the sculptures mean to them, and how they've been shaped by the work itself. And a handful of us got the opportunity to experience what it's like to work with metal. We made butterflies and dragonflies just like you see in the Carousel gift shop. And that was the story I intended to share with you on this podcast. The story of how others were shaped by this work of art. But instead, I found it only fair to reflect on the way I was shaped by that visit, like so many others before me. The decision to visit the Warrior Storyfield was an entirely selfish one, I'll admit. Because the question of how veterans heal is a very personal one to me. While I didn't serve myself, I come from a long line of people who did and still do. Military service is in my bloodstream. It is in my lineage. My father was a Navy pilot, my grandfather a Marine. My cousin is active duty Navy. My brother works for a defense contractor. When I was little, the big family scandal was that my aunt chose to become a Black Hawk helicopter pilot instead of working for the Navy. You see, that's how you rebelled in my family. You joined the Army instead of the Navy. And in 1981, in a Navy hospital, out I came. All big brown eyes and a big throbbing heart. A touchy-feely empath who did her best growing up to feel all of the feelings of the adults around her, as if to suck up their pain. There was so much grief in my household that I thought if I could feel it all for them, if I could suck it up all inside me, maybe my parents wouldn't be so sad. But I learned quickly that feelings weren't tolerated. And neither was error. Anything that could be done should be done right the first time you tried. No exceptions, no excuses. Which is scary for a kid because in general, kids don't know how to do anything. They're just learning how to be. But being a kid was not justification for imperfection in my house. The bed was to be made, the grades to be achieved, all of the time, no exceptions, no excuses. And I learned pretty quickly to hide my feelings from myself and from others, to tuck them neatly away, just like the hospital corners of my bed sheets, deep within my belly, deep within my bones. Feelings were weakness. Feelings were girl stuff. Speaking of which, I was a girl. Still am. And that was also a problem because girls are not boys. And I spent most of my life hiding who I was, not only from my parents, but from myself. When I found out I was good at physics, my dad and my teachers were delighted. It didn't matter that I hated it. It got me attention. It got me praise. And a long line of meandering choices and decisions, all technically made by me, landed me in a windowless cubicle in a secure DC facility as an intelligence analyst for the U.S. military. My dad was proud. I was miserable. And as anyone who's ever made decisions on behalf of others know, they tend to catch up to you. My body was destroyed. I was told I'd never be able to have kids, and I was 28 years old. That year, my mother and my stepfather passed. And shortly thereafter, I left my government job, intending to become a yoga instructor. Yoga had helped me learn how to hold space for my feelings and safely feel them. Yoga helped my body heal. It also encouraged me to start writing, to start expressing myself. My father's response was to have me committed, or at least tried to. Turns out, studying downward-facing dog is not grounds to hospitalize an adult woman. And while I was incredibly angry at the time, I understand it now. My dad was terrified of the unknown. He was petrified of the gray area. He was scared of his own feelings. He went from his bedroom in my grandmother's home to a dorm room at the Naval Academy. For the entirety of his life, decisions were made for him. He was told where to live and what to eat. He was given order after order. Do this, don't do that. And that imprint trickled down to me. It shaped who I was and who I am now. The military calls spouses and children dependents. My early life, my foundation was dependent on that of my father. Being at the Storyfield brought all of this to the surface. Hearing the experiences of other veterans navigating uncertainty helped me extend more compassion to my father. It wasn't just him. It turns out some of this is a byproduct of military service. I listened to men explain how welding a feather or a claw allowed them to feel the violence within them without getting violent themselves. I learned how the act of showing up day after day at the shop and not being forced to talk gave them space to learn how to talk. As I listened to these men share their experiences, I was given permission to share my own. After our discussion, we had the opportunity to make art ourselves. Amy, our resident butterfly at the carousel, chose to make a butterfly. Melody, the carousel's executive director, and I decided to make some dragonflies. Have you noticed the stunning stained glass windows in the carousel? They were made specifically for us by Cypress Willett, a civilian artist who's been working on the dragon and the phoenix for 3 years now. She always wanted to learn how to weld, and it turns out she is pretty darn good at it. She was there during our visit, and she helped Amy, Melody, and myself bring our little metal pieces to life. I first started pounding my dragonfly with a ball peen hammer. That's what gives it that gorgeous texture. And to my surprise and delight, Robert emphasized multiple times there was no wrong way to make a dragonfly. It was music to my ears. I could not get this wrong. I could not mess this up. And if I did, I could heat the metal and bend it another way. If I didn't like what I saw, there was always a way to fix it. There was always a way to change it. Relief washed over me. So I started whacking my dragonfly, whacking it with wild abandon. I whacked it for fun. I whacked it to see what it would do. I whacked it without consequence. I found myself filled with curiosity, filled with awe. I felt like a kid. I mean, not like when I was a kid, but like the way other kids felt when they were kids, like in normal households. So I'm told. What would happen if I tried this? I would whack it again. What would happen if I got this part hot? Let's try it and find out. I bent the metal this way and that. I tried hitting it this way and that. It was so incredibly freeing to be in a space where there were no wrong answers, where there weren't any answers. The only obligation, the only expectation was that I was to be present and allow whatever was within me to express itself through the metal. Robert encouraged me to yell and to grunt. He encouraged me to feel inside my body and see what wanted to come out. Turns out, an ache in my solar plexus yearned to be expressed that day. Not surprising, as it's the location where human beings feel feelings, where emotions are processed. And I've still got a couple of lingering ones inside. And for the first time in as long as I can remember, the ache within me, that ache in my solar plexus that I've carried my entire life, started to soften. That ache, which had previously been impervious to therapy and to yoga and to all of the other things I had tried before it, started to release. Turns out there is nothing more healing than whacking a piece of metal. And I'm not alone. The veterans who shared their experience of working with Robert on the Dragon and the Phoenix recounted similar experiences. There was something about feeling the violence of it all, feeling the anger of it all, that allowed it to pass through me. As we drove back up to Netherland, my beautiful dragonfly sitting in the back seat next to me, I realized I felt lighter. Like a heavy backpack was no longer on my shoulders. There's this strange divide between those who have served in the military and those who have not. As civilians, we think it's not our problem. We think the wounds our warriors bring back home don't have consequences for us. But I am proof of the lingering effects military life can present to the loved ones of those who served. I am proof that service does not come without a price. I am one of the ripple effects of service members who don't feel safe enough to express their pain. But just like the phoenix, I am learning to come home to myself. I am learning it is safe to drop a line deep within me and fish something out. I am learning it is safe to not know all the answers, and the Warrior Storyfield in just 5 hours helped teach me that lesson. Much like Brad and Danny, I am softer as a result of working in Robert's shop. I am more embodied, more flexible, more malleable, and more expressive. As a result of being in sacred space with others who are exploring their own depths, I have come home to myself just a little bit more. In just 5 hours. Imagine the impact and imprint of those who have been working on this project for decades. Because the Storyfield is a place unlike any other. A place that encourages uncertainty, a place that allows someone to learn how to feel again. I am different because of my time there, because I gave myself permission to be shaped and molded just like the metal. And my story is one of 100. Each person who has contributed to that project has their version of my tale. And those individual details and nuances are all captured in one 16-foot dragon, one 18-foot phoenix, and the space in between. If you or someone you know would like to participate in the Warrior Storyfield or donate to their efforts, please check out the show notes for more details. Also, if you know of a place where this work of art can be adequately displayed and celebrated, please reach out to Robert. They are in the process of finding a permanent home for this piece and could use your help. And those stained glass windows in the carousel, if you love them like I do, you have the chance to adopt one of them. Check out the link in the show notes. In the meantime, take care. Be well. And as we like to say at the Carousel of Happiness, don't delay joy. And we'll see you next time around.
Beginnings and endings are only pretendings. I'll see you next time around. I'll see